Hi everybody, Lynn Burkhead with MajorLeagueFishing.com sitting alongside Major League Fishing angler Andy Montgomery. And Andy, welcome to MLF, Major League Fishing. You like to fish docks, and I live on a lake that, quite frankly, I need to talk to you because I live 5 miles away from Lake Texoma, and Lake Texoma is deep, clear, got very good populations of largemouth, smallmouths, and spots, but it's got tons of marinas and tons of docks. And that becomes one of the predominant patterns, and I've never really excelled at fishing docks. What's the biggest mistake you think a guy like me makes when I try to fish docks?
I think probably just fishing docks is what you do. You just go fish docks. And when I fish docks, you know, there's different types of docks. There's docks on flats, there's deep docks, there's docks on points. You know, there's docks on bluffs, there's marinas, you know, there's big floats, there's pole docks. So instead of just going out and saying, you know, I fish docks, which is what a lot of, you know, amateur or weekend anglers do, when you do go to fishing docks and you do go to catching some fish, then you really need to pay attention to what type of dock it is, where it's located, what type of bank it's on, and, you know, start paying attention to the little things that will allow you to go fish other docks and get bites instead of just fishing dock because it's a dock.
All right, let's talk about some of the various types of docks. You mentioned a number of them, and I have every one of those within 10 miles of my house. The biggest thing that I think people think about when they think of docks is marinas, floating docks. The problem with floating docks to me has always been it's pretty easy to hit the corners and to hit the obvious stuff, but it's the stuff back up underneath where you know there's some bass hanging out that are hard to get to. How do you get to them? What are you fishing to get to them? How do you cherry pick them?
Yeah, I skip a bait a lot, so I actually, you know, skip it is something I kind of learned to do back home. Growing up in the Carolinas, dock fishing is huge, and you better learn how to, we call it skipping a jig. You better learn how to skip a jig, and it's kind of evolved where I skip different types of baits. So, you know, you really need to learn how to skip with a bait caster to get them hard to reach fish, and if you can't, you know, get you a spinning rod and be able to skip it. But you definitely got to get up in the shade to catch the majority of fish. Now, there's times when fish get on the corners. The corners of docks are always pretty good, just right on the corners. So, you know, and then when you have a high dock, you need to get pretty good at pitching. So you get good at your pitching and skipping, and that's going to allow you to catch some fish that are tucked way back under there on them high pressure bluebird days.
Now, one of the things I love to do in Lake Texoma with a lot of big, almost ocean-going type rigs, big pleasure boats. There are a lot of high boat houses in those marinas, and you can take a buzz bait or something and throw it right down on the edges of that, and a lot of times catch those fish that are hanging around in that shade.
Right.
What jigs obviously come to mind, but what are some of the other baits you can fish marinas with?
Yeah, you know, a bladed swim jig like a Strike Cure Pure Poison or Strike King or H blade. You know, they're kind of developed into one of my go-to dock baits. You know, because like a big marina or something that you're talking about, or a big floating dock, the fish are going to be right under the float. They're only, you know, even if that deal, some of the marinas set over 60, 70, you know, even 80 foot of water, the fish are just going to be 2 or 3 foot deep. So you want something you can wind right under the float. A spinner bait's real good too, and just stuff you can wind about 2 to 3 foot deep, just right under the surface or right underneath the floats, and you know you're going to catch a lot of fish doing that.
Now, that particular type of situation, the marina docks, the floating docks over deep water, and that's exactly, I mean, the marinas in Lake Texoma are typically 40, 50, 60 foot of water below a lot of these things. They really are great in the summertime because they provide shade and thermal relief, but they also can be good at other times of the years. What are some of the other times of the years they'll excel?
For the most part, unless a big time spawn's going on, you know, they're good. You know, they can be good in the winter time, and that's when you take like a jerk bait, a KVD jerk bait or something, and fish down the sides of them, or if you can, throw up in the slip and use the jerk bait in the winter time. You know, fall they get around them because a lot of shad kind of congregate around them. In the summertime, a lot of brim congregate them. So it's, to me, it's a year-round deal except for when the fish are actually spawning, and that's really the only time that you're not going to find fish around, you know, marinas or floating docks or any type of dock is most of the time when they're spawning. That's it.
Let's talk about floating docks. Let's talk about floating docks that are difficult to skip a bait under. How do you pick them apart?
Well, I really never met one that I didn't think I could get under. Really, I mean,
you haven't been fishing with me.
Well, you can fish the corners good and the edges, and whichever way the sun is, the shadier side of the docks, obviously going to be better. So, again, a floating dock or a cable supported dock is what I call them. Something you can wind right under the float, like it's a pure poison or a rage blade or a spinner bait, or just something you can wind right down the side of the float is going to be better. In real clear water, you may have to go something like a caffeine shad, a jerk bait type deal. But if the water's just got any color at all, or if you got some wind's the same as color, then you can wind something right down the edge of the docks and catch them.
Docks played a very important role in the last Major League Fishing event this last fall in the Denton area on Lake Ray Roberts. Not Lake Ray Roberts, but Lake Grapevine. There are several marinas on Lake Grapevine, and they played a very key role. In fact, Kelly Jordan caught one of the biggest bass in the history of Major League Fishing, a 7-pound, 3-ounce fish on an Alabama rig, fishing right down the edge of one of those floating docks. So it's not just that there are some fish there. You can almost run docks almost all day long as a pattern, right?
Absolutely, but there again, just make sure you pay attention to what type of dock. Don't just run a dock just because it's a dock, and just kind of get into the details of the pattern. The pattern in the pattern is what we typically call it. So just really pay attention to what type of dock, and then you can run around and duplicate it a lot better than just going randomly down a bank fishing dock.
All right, let's shift gears just a little bit, because in that tournament and on Grapevine, another type of dock presented itself, and I've learned by fishing not really my home lake, but my favorite lake, Lake Fork, I've learned that sometimes when you have docks that are connected to the shoreline in shallower water and they're fixed, they're not so much floating, you've really got to pay attention almost to what's on the bottom around the dock as much as the dock itself, because a lot of property owners will put brush or tires or rocks, and those can be bass attracting and holding structure.
Obviously, I mean, anytime you got brush or anything else is going to make it better. And it seems like that the fixed pole docks always have more brush and stuff around them than a floating dock, and that's typically because the floating docks are put on lakes that have a lot of fluctuation, where they can wind them out. The cable sported dock, they let them out on wheels basically when the lake's down, and then they bring them back up when the lake's up. So to plant structure around them docks, it may be on the bank or it may be too deep out in front of the dock. So it seems like I don't know if there's more around the stationary docks, the pole-supported docks. It just seems like you can find it easier because it's there. Once they drop it beside a pole, that pole ain't going nowhere, so that brush pile is going to stay there. So, but a pole dock can be really good. And
what baits do you want to use around here?
It's a pole dock's typically going to be shallow, so you can fish bottom-oriented baits, where a floating dock's going to be over deeper water. So a pole dock, you can flip it with like a game hog, a rodent, a jig is probably my favorite deal. So, you can fish more bottom-oriented baits on a pole dock versus a cable or floating supported dock. You need to fish stuff that you wind high in the water column.
When you're fishing the bottom-oriented baits, what are the rod and reel setups that you like to use for those?
The bottom, when I'm flipping and pitching, I use a 7/6 Tatula Daiwa Tatula, and then a high-speed reel Daiwa Tatula reel. When I'm winding stuff, I use like a 7-foot, a 7-1, same deal Daiwa Tatula rod and reel. And when I'm casting, I want a little tip, and when I'm flipping, I want a little tip. So typically, I go with like a medium-heavy rod. It just makes me more accurate. The stiffer the rod, you're not going to be as accurate as if you got a little bit of tip in your rod to place that bait where you want to.
One last question. What about lines? What do you like to throw?
Normally, it's all like 20-pound fluorocarbon. Typically, it's big stuff, and I may even go to 25. But, I really now there's not many situations where I downsize line. The only time is if you do fish, like a wacky worm or something around docks, then you can use like 10 pounds on a spinning rod or something. But typically for my pure poisons, my raised blades, my jigs, game holes, it's all 20-pound fluorocarbon.
Okay. Andy Montgomery, he's one of the best at fishing docks. He's one of the best, and that's why he's a Major League Fishing angler. If you'd like to learn more about Andy and the techniques that he employs or any of the other anglers, go to MajorLeagueFishing.com.